Welcome back to Her Side of Campus, the show where ideas spark action and voices ignite change. I'm your host, Komal Iqbal, and today we're diving deep into a conversation that just might change the way you see the world. In this episode, we're talking about a topic that affects far too many people but is still often hidden: honour-based abuse and violence against women and girls. Just a disclaimer that this podcast may cover topics that could be triggering or distressing to some listeners, including but not limited to discussions about mental health, abuse, violence, discrimination, trauma and other sensitive topics. We encourage you to prioritise your well-being. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, you are welcome to pause the podcast, skip a section or stop listening entirely. If you feel affected by the topics discussed, please consider reaching out to a trusted friend, family member, professional support service and the University Mental Health and Counselling team, or visit Talking Therapies. I'm joined by Lindsay and Davina from the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence team in Bradford, who do incredible work supporting survivors, raising awareness and providing training services to respond better to these issues. Both Lindsay and Davina are also survivors of abuse themselves, and today they'll be sharing their experiences, insights and advice for others who might be going through something similar. Thank you both for joining me today. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon everybody. My name is Davina Clark. As has already been said, I work in the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence team for Bradford Metropolitan District Council. I'm relatively new to post, however I've been working within the domestic abuse field for the last 18 plus years.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Bridge. I work for the same team, the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence team at Bradford Council. I've worked there for a number of years, but I've worked in the field of domestic abuse for 30 plus years now. And same as Davina, we are currently really working together on looking at how we engage people in understanding, recognising and responding to domestic abuse and sexual violence.
Amazing. Can we start by clarifying what exactly do we mean by a forced marriage, and how is it different from an arranged marriage?
Yeah, sure. So a forced marriage is when someone faces a lot of pressure or threats or abuse to marry without their free and full consent. This is very different to an arranged marriage. Arranged marriage is where families, community members, they may help to choose a partner, but both people have the right to say yes or no. And the key difference is choice. In a forced marriage, there's no real choice. In an arranged marriage, consent is given and is essential.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's still happening today?
I think there's lots of different reasons why it's still happening today, but it's mainly because of the beliefs and pressures that drive people, and it's not disappeared. In some families, there's strong expectations around honour, reputation or tradition, and young people can feel like they have no real voice or a safe way to say no. It also continues because many victims actually don't know what is happening to them is abuse, and it also continues because it's hidden.
Yeah.
Victims are often scared to speak out, and professionals sometimes sadly don't always recognise the signs.
What factors make forced marriages continue even today?
I think because there's a lot of pressure laid on young people. For some families, the idea about duty or reputation or doing what's expected is still really strong. And when it harms the person involved, and many people just don't feel like they can say no, they're scared of letting the family down or they're worried about the consequences.
Yeah.
And those kind of pressures can build and make it really hard for people to be able to speak out or to even actually know where to go and seek help.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's why it still continues today.
You mentioned about abuse in the context of it being a forced marriage. What kind of emotional and physical and even social impact can forced marriages have on young people's lives?
So it can have a huge negative effect on people, and that can be emotionally, because the situation can lead to fear, anxiety, depression, or feeling completely trapped or powerless. Physically, they might face violence.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've seen in our work that doesn't stop at sexual abuse or sexual violence, or it can also lead to health problems linked to stress.
Yeah.
And socially, it can mean a lot of isolation for people. They're often cut off from friends, family, their day-to-day work, education, losing career opportunities, and just having no or little control over their own future. And that can affect every part of someone's life and emotional well-being.
Yeah. It's honestly insane that it still happens today.
Mm.
What can happen if somebody, sometimes they might want to speak up about it or resist that pressure?
So we know in our practice that things can escalate very quickly, and if somebody does try to speak up or resist a forced marriage, they might face anger, pressure, threats, or increased control from the actual family.
Yeah.
Some people, as we said before, can become isolated from friends. They're much more monitored closely by the family or the community, or they can be told that they're bringing shame and dishonour on a family. In more serious cases, sometimes that pressure can turn into honour-based abuse. And in most extreme situations, it can even lead to what are called honour-based killings. And that's why we think it's so important that anybody feeling unsafe reaches out to someone who understands the risks, but can also help them keep them safe and protected.
Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
I just was going to think about the identity that you're searching for when you're a young person. It's such a fragile time in your life, isn't it, when you're young and you're looking for your identity, you're trying to figure out who you are. You really need your family and your friends around you at that time. So the thought of going against any of that can be really difficult and can really play into that. You know, who actually am I then if I'm going against what I thought I was all this time?
Yeah.
So I think it's that sort of issue that we're looking at as well. It's multi-layered, I think, as Davina's already said, but just that really crucial time in your life when you do need your family and friends around you.
Yeah. And sometimes people just don't get that, do they? Which is just, I feel, unfair. How did each of you get involved in this work with domestic abuse and the sexual violence team in Bradford?
So, like I mentioned previously, although I'm quite new to the specific role within the domestic abuse and sexual violence team, I've been working in the domestic abuse sector for 18 years. Most of my career has been supporting victims and survivors of domestic abuse, including children and young people, both at crisis support and at recovery. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working directly with individuals and families and just really helping them to be able to keep safe and rebuild their life and to be free from abuse. I started off as a volunteer at Women's Aid, and the natural progression of that then I just ended up getting paid employment through that. But I just felt like it were a real natural step for me because it were coming into this role, I were able to take everything that I'd learned from frontline working and develop that into training for professionals so that they'd be able to help them build their confidence and their knowledge and skills to recognise abuse early and respond in the best possible way.
Yeah. And what about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, similar. You're probably going to ask us about this, but we are both survivors of domestic abuse ourselves, so there seemed to be a natural inclination for us there.
Yeah.
But I also started off volunteering many years ago. A really good route in, I think, to anything is volunteering. Taste it, see whether you
100%,
like it. Worked for Women's Aid myself, and then came along to work for the local authority when this job came up.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see that you guys started off as volunteers because even that shows how much passion you have for the work that you do, which I just think is really, really great. So, yeah, like you mentioned, Lindsay, you both are quite open about being survivors yourselves. Would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about your experiences and how they shaped the work that you do now?
Yeah, I'm comfortable in sharing. So, as we've already mentioned, I am a survivor myself, and that experience had a huge influence on the work I do today, because I think going through it personally gives you a real lived understanding and insight of what people you are supporting are going through. And although we all have different experiences, there's a lot of commonalities within them experiences.
Yeah.
And for me, I just understand how complex and isolating it can be. You can feel really alone. And I think it also gave me an insight of understanding how important it is to have the right support at the right time. And I think, as you said, from that volunteering, it gave me a real passion because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a difference to other survivors or victims of domestic abuse, and I wanted them not to be in that situation as long as what I stayed in it for. And I just think I know what a difference it makes when somebody really listens to you,
Yeah.
you know, and believes you and responds with compassion. And I think that's what drives me in this role, to helping others and professionals to be that person for someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo most of that. I think lots of us have very, very similar experiences. It's a long time ago for me now, but I do think about the shame attached to that. And I think you carry some of that with you forward in life, but just being so terribly embarrassed about what was happening to me and thinking, I don't really want to talk to anybody about this because nobody's going to understand what this is like.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah.
So I think we carry forward. We want people to be heard. We want people to feel comfortable enough to be able to speak. And when you know that you're speaking to someone who's been through a similar experience, it's always easier.
Thank you for sharing that. I can imagine it takes a lot to turn something painful and those types of experiences into something that helps others. And I think it's very important, the work that you do. It helps a lot of people and it must be very rewarding as well. For people who might not fully understand, how would you describe honour-based abuse and how it fits into the wider issue of violence against women and girls?
So honour-based abuse refers to any form of abuse that's committed to protect or defend the perceived, and I say perceived, honour of the family or community. It can take a wide range of forms. We spoke about some of them before: emotional or physical abuse, physical violence, coercion, restrictions of freedom, threats, and in some cases forced marriage. It often involves multiple perpetrators, and that's what makes it different from domestic abuse, because it usually can include often lots of multiple perpetrators, including community members as well. And they all work together to maintain control over that person. And recognising these dynamics is actually crucial, because it's not a one single perpetrator situation, and the emotional and cultural pressures on victims can be immense. You know, a lot of pressure is placed on them to conform. And in many ways, honour-based abuse should be viewed as part of a wider violence against women and girls agenda, because at that core, like domestic abuse, although different in terms of perpetrator, it is about power and control.
Yeah.
And it is about one person or community trying to exert power and control over the other person to get them to conform to do what they want. And I think violence and domestic abuse and coercive control is restricting someone's choices, and ultimately that's what it's about. It's about removing that person's human rights.
Yeah, and not letting them have control over their own lives, essentially, which, like I said before, it's not fair on that person, because they should be able to live the way they want, and it's not up to anybody else to have that control over them.
And we see that fit in the wider agenda of violence against women and girls, so we see some of them same forms of abuse.
So why do you think it's still happening today?
I think it's happening because the beliefs and attitudes that underpin it, things like control, shame and misplaced ideas about family honour, they're still really deep-rooted in some communities and cultures.
Yeah.
And like we said before, it's more about power control rather than faith or tradition. And this can be reinforced by community pressures or from fear from bringing shame on a family. And it also continues because it's such a hidden crime. It happens, and the victims can be really isolated and afraid to speak out. And they often don't know where to turn for help. So that's why sometimes, raising this awareness is really important, but also raising professionals' understanding to be able to recognise it so that we can all see opportunities and intervene as early as possible. And we can also spot indicators that if we're able to recognise it, we can spot some of the signs early and respond safely.
Yeah.
And build trust within, with victims, survivors, so that we can break those cycles of silence and abuse.
How much of an effect or influence does culture have on the way people view or ignore some of these issues?
Culture and media can sometimes, it can make honour-based abuse harder to recognise. Cultural expectations around family reputation can silence victims and make it seem normal to some families. And I think the media only ever focuses on the most extreme cases.
Yeah.
So then it can make people think that it's rare, or it's not going to happen to them, or it's not going to happen in their circle or in their community. When reality, we know that it often starts with subtle control and pressure or restrictions that people might not recognise. It's things that have been taking place for such a long period of time that they're conditioned to just think that that's how things are and that's
it's
how
normal,
things, and
yeah.
it's normal.
I was going to say, like, an example that I can give is, like, one of my friends, her family is awful to her, and when another person is awful to her, it doesn't affect her. She doesn't realise that that's bad and that's not normal and that's not how somebody should talk to her. Yeah, it's become so normal to her that she doesn't see that it's a bad thing anymore, which I think is really, really bad. But having those people around you that understand that and that can tell you, oh, you know, I don't think this is good behaviour towards you, will then help them maybe understand a little bit more that that isn't normal.
Or just having that different perspective, that different conversation, because we all do things over time and it just becomes part of the norm, and you don't really know sometimes why you do things that you do.
That's it, yeah. It takes 60 days or something for a habit to become a habit. So, yeah, there's that as well.
And I'm also wondering whether we don't do enough to show the positive side of a relationship. And I know we're going to go on to talk about that later, but we talk an awful lot about what is honour-based abuse, what is forced marriage, when actually we could do with spending some time on, well, what does it look like if it's nice? What does it look like if it's healthy? And what does it look like if the marriage is lovely? You know,
that's it, yeah. How do you recognise the good from the bad, isn't it? Yeah.
Counter-narrative would be great, wouldn't it, in these circumstances?
Yeah, I think more people need to be aware of the differences between a good and a bad relationship and how they can easily recognise the difference, because a lot of people just, they can't. When we spoke before, you guys mentioned that a lot of people tend to feel invisible to services. Could you tell us a bit more about what that means and how it affects victims trying to get help today?
I think victims often feel invisible to services because their abuse is so hidden. We've talked a lot about hidden. It's a hidden crime, and I think they're often afraid of not being believed, or they worry about what shame that might bring on the family if they speak out. Also, some professionals, they might fear that they won't understand their situation or the cultural pressures that they might face. And when signs are missed or victims are asked the right questions, it reinforces that feeling of being unseen. So they might reach out for help but actually not get the correct response or the right response that they're thinking, and think, oh, do you know, what's the point?
I also wanted to touch upon the fact that both of you guys are from different backgrounds. Do you think that your experiences with visibility and being heard were different because of this?
I think it does play a factor in it, coming from different communities, and people from different backgrounds can have very different experience of being seen and heard.
Yeah.
Culture, language, community expectations, past interactions.
Yeah.
As we said, you know, you might have had a negative interaction with a particular service, which makes you then less likely to reach out for help to that particular service. So I do think that all plays a part. And for some, there's extra barriers like fear of judgment, racism, or being understood, which can make them less confident to speak up. Whereas other people might feel more comfortable in that situation.
Yeah. If they have like those open conversations, isn't it? What about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think for me, I remember quite clearly having a different response to where I lived, which was quite a poor area in town, and then a different response when I was at my parents' house, because that was more of an affluent area.
Yeah.
And that really made me think, oh my goodness, you know, this is real, you know, that there is an actual different response from key services where I was treated totally differently. I was the same person, but I was treated totally differently in two different places in town.
Crazy. That is crazy. So when you guys did seek help, what sort of services did you turn to?
So me personally, we've spoke about this before, me and Lindsay, I didn't actually reach out to any services, but that were more about the fear and the shame that we've already spoken about. And I think the biggest thing that held me back was the uncertainty, because I didn't know what were going to come of that.
Yeah.
I was scared of the reprisals of that. I was worried about what were going to happen if I did disclose, what
Yeah.
came next. So I think it was that unknown. And that's why I always encourage others not to struggle and wait as long as I did. And that's why
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about saying, look, we've got some amazing services in Bradford, that people don't have to stay and suffer in it as long as I did, because people do stay in situations a very long time due to fear.
Yeah.
It is just due to fear.
And also sometimes they just want to protect the other person, even though that
Yeah.
person is horrible to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes hard to separate the behaviour from the person,
Mm.
because you might have these, well, I did have these really strong feelings, but also at the same time I knew that it wasn't right. I knew
Yeah.
what they were doing to me was really, really wrong.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just hurting me physically. And the physical bit, actually, it sounds crazy, but the physical bit I could deal with. It
Yeah.
was the mental torture that and the
Yeah.
gaslighting and the constantly telling me I were degrading, all these degrading words and names, and just making me feel like I didn't have autonomy of my own
Yeah.
brain. I almost felt like I was just quite robotic in the end, that I was just
Yeah.
going through the motions. I knew what would make him angry. I knew what would make him happy. I knew not to lift my head up. I knew to keep my head down. I knew that if I did this, it would cause that reaction. If I did that,
Yeah.
So you're constantly living in that fear, like I
Yeah.
said.
So did it cause you to be like slightly dissociated, like not being able to kind of feel that pain physically, but emotionally you could tell that it was making a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think people around me saw it before I saw it. So a lot of people kept saying to me, "Oh, are you okay? You're not your usual self. Are you
Yeah.
okay? Are you okay?" And I was just in survival mode.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, because when you try and think back, it all becomes a bit of a blur, and I can't remember. I can remember certain bits, but there's lots of bits that I can't
Yeah.
remember. So maybe that is.
That is an aspect, just
Yeah.
like your brain just wants to block it out because it was just that bad. How did you get out of it then?
I actually moved countries, and I know that's a really
That
extreme.
is a very big step
That's
to
very
take.
extreme, but my abuse took place in a different country. So I suppose my escapism was that my family were here in the UK, so I managed to say I'm coming back to visit, and then I just never went back.
Wow. That is insane.
I've been back subsequently, but
Yeah.
at that time I just had that gap away, so it was much easier. But even then, it was very difficult,
Yeah.
and I were even abused on the way to the airport.
Wow.
So, it didn't stop
Yeah.
just because I was leaving.
Yeah. That's crazy. Lindsay, did you seek any
I
help?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, I think it's very interesting. It might sort of touch on maybe another question as well, but I sought help from the police, and it wasn't me that rang the police initially, so my neighbours rang the police. Police would probably attend my house about once a week, and they got to know me.
Yeah.
I eventually got a really good police officer who was very, very good and recognised the pattern in the behaviour, recognised that this wasn't going away, was very helpful, and did something that was I think very interesting for me at the time. Because he was a male police officer, he just took his uniform, he just took his jacket off and took his tie off and became a normal human being and just sat and talked to me.
Yeah.
And just went, right, it's just
Wow.
me and you, let's have this conversation. But equally, I had my health visitor at the time was a man, which is quite unusual in those days. But he was really, really supportive. And again, he was quite persistent. He didn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
He said he knew what was going on.
Yeah.
I tried to cover it up because I was embarrassed, I was ashamed.
Yeah.
I didn't know the consequences of what was going to happen if I told
Yeah.
him. But actually, once I did say, yes, you're right,
Yeah.
he was brilliant. And he just said, right, we're going to get you all the support you need. I had a few bad experiences as well with organisations where I felt like nobody was listening to me. I felt like I was banging my head against a wall. But I think the two good people out of those organisations were my lifesavers.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So that kind of support made a real difference to how your life turned out, essentially. For anyone else who is listening at the moment that might be in a similar situation, what support is available in Bradford? So what kind of services, and even further out, like who can they reach out to?
So there's some fantastic organisations in Bradford that they're able to reach out to. We also have the Domestic Abuse National Helpline, which is available 24/7 on 0808 2000 24/7. And as we said, we know reaching out can feel scary, but it can also be life-changing as well. And nationally, we also have, for honour-based abuse and forced marriage, you have Carmen Nirvana, which can be reached on 0800 5999 24/7. And then we also have a commission service in Bradford called Stay in Put on 0808 2800 999.
Yeah, and we've also got a website which you might be interested in, is www.bradford-dasv.co.uk. And if you go onto that website, you will find lots of information on there. It's really safe to use. But I think also wherever you are, if you're at uni, if you're at college, look to your safeguarding staff as well.
Yeah.
Look to people who are out there to support you. If you use a GP service, health service, any service at all, they will all have somebody who's a champion in this area. So don't be frightened of reaching out to anybody.
You guys mentioned that you're also doing some training. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what this training involves and what issues you're hoping to address through it?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to announce that we've got an honour-based abuse and forced marriage awareness training. So that's going to be coming in the new year and going to be delivered out across the district to multi-agencies. It's a really important piece of work because there's not been any dedicated training in this area for quite some time, so we want to revive it, we want to bring it back to life. And the programme's designed to refresh professionals' understanding, to raise awareness, but also, more importantly, to build confidence. We want to make sure that whether you're an experienced practitioner or you're a student preparing for frontline, we hope that this training and this conversation has given you an insight out into why training is so important and how you can get involved in it. Honour-based abuse is something that many professionals find challenging to identify and respond to. Not because they don't care, but just because it's so complex, it's so hidden, and it's often misunderstood. So the aiming of the training is to close that gap. It's about giving professionals the confidence, like I've already said, and the tools to recognise those signs early that we said about and to respond appropriately. And like Lindsay said, to work together to safeguard victims.
That's really good. It's very helpful to know that there's more than just the support out there. There's also that training for professionals and just regular people to have a better understanding of their surroundings, essentially. What do you hope that professionals, students, or members of the community take away from this training?
Like I said, we hope that they leave the training feeling more confident to recognise the early signs of honour-based abuse and forced marriage, and understand that these issues are safeguarding concerns and not cultural problems to ignore. Sometimes often it just happens in that culture. It's not about culture, it's not about religion. It's about power and control, like we said before. So we want professionals to feel equipped to ask the right questions, to take disclosures seriously, and to know exactly where to go for specialist support. There's lots of fantastic services out there that specialise in honour-based abuse and forced marriage, and we want professionals to know and utilise those services as well. So we understand the seriousness of the risk, but we just hope that they feel empowered to act quickly.
Yeah. Well, this has been such an important and moving conversation that we've had today. Before we finish, what would you both say to somebody who might be experiencing honour-based abuse or any form of violence but doesn't feel ready to speak up yet?
I think I would say to them, what is the alternative? So there's a magic question that we like to ask people, and the magic question is, if you woke up tomorrow and everything was good in your life, what would have changed? And if we ask ourselves that question, we can start to think about what is it that we want and what is it that we don't want in our lives. Our lives are really special and precious, and As far as we know, we only get one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say use that to the best as you can, have the best life you possibly can. And there will be people out there and they will be within your reach that are going through similar experiences. Never think you are alone, because you never are.
Yeah.
There'll be lots of people going through the same experiences as you. But together, we can change those experiences and make them better.
Yeah. Strength in numbers.
I'd say to anybody experienced in honour-based abuse or forced marriage or any form of violence, you don't have to be ready to speak out today, but you also don't have to face this alone. When it's happening to you, it's not your fault,
Yeah.
because you carry a lot of that shame, that guilt, you blame yourself, and that there are people out there who will listen and believe you and help you when you feel safe enough to reach out. Even if it's just talking to a helpline anonymously,
Mm-hmm.
can be the first step. You
Yeah.
don't have to give any details, you don't have to give your name, but you can just offload what you're carrying alone, because it can feel really isolating.
Yeah.
So just call one of them helplines anonymously and just have somebody there who listens, who understands.
Mm-hmm. And what is one piece of advice that you would give to people listening?
I'd say tell one safe person whenever you're ready. It might be a friend, it might be a professional, or like we spoke about, a confidential helpline or specialist service. Reaching out doesn't mean that you have to take action immediately. It just means that you're not carrying this on your own anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say similar. Sometimes it is just about testing the waters. What does this feel like speaking to somebody else? And speaking anonymously to a helpline, as Davina has said, is a really good way to test that. What does it feel like speaking about it for the first time for you? Because that can be quite a scary thought once you start to speak. So just have a go and see what that feels like.
Thank you so much, Lindsay and Davina, for sharing your experiences, your strength, and the work you're doing to help other people. If anybody has been affected by anything that has been discussed in today's episode, please reach out to support services, because you are not alone. Remember, everybody has a role in shaping our society, and the journey does not stop here. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep on making a difference. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Her Side of Campus.